Hi, in the next lesson I would like to answer the question who a data engineer is. So I bet you already have an idea, either rough or very firm idea, on data engineer's role in data teams, but nonetheless it's very important to be at the same level of understanding. And in this lesson I would like to expose you and share with you a definition of data engineers, which is a bit mine and which comes from my experience and things I saw in various places. So on the screen now you can see a quite simplistic vision of data teams. So we have data analysts, data engineers in the middle, and data scientists. Of course, you can also add to this picture personas like product owners, like analytic engineers, which are at the time I'm recording this video are quite new in the data landscape. But nonetheless, this simplistic division clearly identifies three scopes of skills that are present in data teams. So to start, you have data analysts. They master SQL. They are responsible, they master SQL, they master also business processes and business domain, and they are mainly responsible for translating the data to some understandable format by other non-technical users, very often the executive members of the team. And they collaborate firmly closely with data engineers because they use the data that is processed and prepared by the data engineering pipelines. On the other hand or side of this picture, this schema, you have data scientists. So these people are more responsible for adding some intelligence to the data that is generated and produced by data engineers, so that, for example, they might predict some issues with the IoT devices you have in your company, or maybe predict the sales for the next year, or recommend the books on your e-commerce store and things like that. So all these data scientists and data analyst personas need the data that is prepared by data engineers, and that's why I put the data engineers in the middle, in the center of this schema. Of course, there is no data team that could work only with data engineers, only with data scientists, or only with data analysts. They all work in a symbiosis. They are very close, and the success of data generally in data first organization depend on these three team members. And to be more precise, what are the responsibilities of data engineers? So to start, we are talking about something which is called data platform. So data platform is kind of central piece that provides data to other, maybe more product-oriented data teams. And here the responsibility will be to guarantee the resilience, cost effectiveness also, because even though you are using cloud, you want to keep your bill as low as possible, and also to define the best and shared practices across different teams in the organization. Of course, depending on the size of your organization, you may or may not have this data platform responsibility. The second responsibility is about data operationalization. So here is how to write the jobs, the data processing logic, in order to avoid manual actions. So here we will obviously use things like data orchestrators, like CI/CD pipelines to deploy jobs, to define the deployment logic for streaming jobs, for example, to avoid service interruption if it's possible. Among other things, maybe more metadata oriented, so metadata management to make the data processed in the jobs operationalizable, so exposed and understandable by other users, not necessarily technical ones. So that generally all that can be included in this part. The third responsibility are business data applications. So I know I said previously that data analysts are more the business focused persons in the team, but in fact data engineers can also work on business facing applications. So for example, if you are a taxi driver, you may want to know when a trip started and finished. You may want to know, for example, if you have an online streaming service, video service, you may want to know when a user started to watch, when he or she stopped, and stuff like that. So for that, you you can implement it as, you can consider it in fact as an application, so from the software engineering world. And that's why data engineers will also be responsible for that, because in this data team I showed you previously, they are the most fluent people with the code, so they should be aware of programming best practices, should be aware of design patterns and things like that. Next is the monitoring and alerting. So it's kind of DevOps or data ops term, but still, if you define a job, you should know what are the key metrics of these jobs. It's not the role of any other member of their team to say, hey, in this job you should spot on this and this. It's up to you, because presumably if you implemented this job, you have done a research on the business value, you have done the research on the input data, on the specificities, and on the impact of each record, so that you can define this data quality and also the monitoring for the infrastructure. So here you can see that from all these 4 points, you can see that data engineers, it's not necessarily only about the code, only about writing Spark jobs to move data from point A to B. It's also about business, so business data applications. It's also about operationalization in terms of metadata, so not only the hard data, but also the decoration of this data, and also about some data ops or DevOps points, like with this monitoring and alerting. And that's not all. Besides these coding approaches, besides this ops role for the monitoring and alerting, data engineers can be also responsible for data modeling. So defining the schemas of your data, defining how the data is stored on your main data store. So for example, it can be a relational database, but it can also be a distributed file system or object storage. And in these cases, you will need to define, for example, how to partition the data. You can store all your data in a single location, but it would maybe not efficient from the data processing standpoint, and you might need to organize it into some kinds of partitions, like for example, daily partitions, hourly partitions, and stuff like that. And what about technology? So for the technology, we have first the programming languages. So SQL, even though it's the first domain of data analysts, data engineers should also know SQL in more advanced way than simply doing joins or group bys. Another key part is Java and Scala, so two JVM-based languages, mostly for data processing frameworks. And there is also Python for data processing frameworks, but also for the data orchestration part, and some DevOps if you want to use Python instead of, for example, Bash script. There is, of course, data processing frameworks, as I mentioned, Apache Spark, Apache Beam, which is a high-level API to highlight that fact, and Apache Flink. For data storage, there are streaming brokers, like for example, Apache Kafka, data warehouses, NoSQL databases, object stores that can be used to store files with different formats, like Apache Parquet, Apache Avro, or Delta Lake. And there are others. So in these others, you can find Apache Airflow, which is a data orchestrator to synchronize and to operationalize your jobs. There are some DevOps practices like CI/CD integration, infrastructure as code, because it's very helpful if you work on the cloud. Programming best practices, like I mentioned, clean code. Git knowledge is also quite important. TDD approach, test-driven development. Agile, knowing Agile, how to build a product, not in waterfall mode when you build something, a pipeline during 2 months, and in the end it doesn't meet the business scope. And finally, the cloud computing. And that's pretty much all I wanted to share here and answer this question about who a data engineer is, and I invite you to the next lesson. Thanks for watching.